Let me know when.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, June 19th, 2017.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Peter Tessier.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, folks, it's expansion draft week and it's NHL draft week. And, believe me, after the Leafs got eliminated, that's all I really had to look forward to was expansion draft week and NHL draft week. So we are here. And we have some news from yesterday. The protection lists for 30 NHL teams were released. There were some surprises, and we're going to talk mostly about that today. We may be joined by Eklund en route to his plane in, I think he's leaving out of Newark, and Kevin Allen may join us, but we're going to start with, just some of the surprises in terms of some of the protection lists. Jan, I told everybody to take a look at the lists, and I think everybody probably perused them. Who stood out to you as one that was just a puzzling list?
Well, I think there was a couple, and it's probably been.
Hey, everyone. So,
sorry, guys.
Probably not the greatest connection. So I'm going to let you guys go and do your thing. Okay. So,
Okay.
Enjoy.
Okay.
Just quick to know this. I'm going to update the rumor blog hour and a half. So keep an eye out there if you can hear me at all. You hear what I'm saying or no?
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. So about an hour and a half, I'll be updating the rumor blog, and so have a good show from there, and I'll talk to you after that.
All right, Ak. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jerry. See ya.
And Kevin Allen has joined us. Guys, we'll hold off on the protection list for a second because let's start off with Kevin. The nominees for the U.S. the U.S. Hall of Fame were announced today. I saw that former Leaf coach Ron Wilson was one of the names mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And the linesman, long career, very respected official. Was on the list, and Jackie Parker of Boston University, and Ben Smith, of course, who's best known, even though he's had a long career in men's hockey as well, but known for leading the U.S. women's team to the first gold medal at the 1998 Olympics.
Jack Parker is an interesting one because BU is just an absolute powerhouse. Like it's unbelievable that he was at 40 seasons. It just to even hold a job that long is hard in this life, and to hold a head coaching job like that is just a stranglehold. And the team was so successful. I have a lot of respect for him. I think to me, he's actually, for me, the biggest name on that list.
Yeah, I would say Ron Wilson is to me just because
Wilson's huge. Yeah.
He's had such a long career, and I know he didn't, win the cup, but certainly, his importance to the U.S. hockey, like in leading the 1996 team to the World Cup medal, and of course he's been an Olympic coach, and he truly understood sort of what it was like to be an American competing against the Canadian powerhouses. When he came up, he gave one of the great speeches of all time when the U.S. players were preparing to compete against the Canadians in 1996. He talked about, he said when he first started, he wasn't even in the back of the bus. He was in the luggage compartment. He was. And he said that his goal for the Americans at some point when it came to hockey, that the Americans would be driving the bus. And when U.S., he asked each individual player what they would be willing to do. And he said, he told Brian Leach, I know what Mark Messier would do. If he came across and he checked you, rudely or not, based on what Canada needed, he would, drive you through the boards. Are you willing to do the same thing? And he went down and asked each American player to do that. And after they won the gold medal, his speech started, those boys were now driving the bus. And most every player on that team remembers that, being, a very inspirational pregame speech and a inspirational postgame speech.
I wonder how much Wilson's legacy would have changed if Sidney Crosby had not scored the golden goal and, say, Zach Parise had.
Well, it would just have added a gold medal, to his resume for the for the Olympics to be sure. But it's still pretty good. I think he's pretty much known as, one of the great coaches in American hockey history. And even though he really wasn't born in America, as I recall, I think he was born in Windsor when his dad,
you're right.
Yeah, when his dad was coaching in. He's definitely American. He's very good friends. I believe played at Providence with Brian Burke, played for Lou Lamoriello. I've been with both he and Brian Burke when they're together, and it's like, being with a bunch of high school buddies, a lot of that sort of frat boy, you're ugly, no, you're uglier type camaraderie, that sort of thing. It's actually quite fun to be with Ron Wilson and Brian Burke when they're together. But he's very I've always loved his attitude. He takes it seriously. He took international competition seriously. It was important to him that the other guy who I felt was probably even took it to a greater degree was Chris Chelios. Chelios, international competition very, very seriously. Maybe just even more so than Ron Wilson, but Ron Wilson was right up there. And I agree with Russ's assessment on Jackie Parker as well, and really a very good class for the USA Hockey.
Kevin, we were going to go around the horn, so to speak, because the 30 NHL teams released their protected lists. I thought there were some rather strange omissions in terms of players being protected. Now we know that there are some trades that are already in place. There may be some other ones that will take place today. Although George McPhee has come out and said that today is the deadline. Is like if you want to make sure you want to protect a particular player on your roster that is exposed, that today is the deadline, and then apparently he's going to start shopping those players to other teams in terms of it being Vegas being sort of the middleman. But Jan, with you first, what team out there were you a little intrigued by or puzzled by in their selections or omissions?
I mean, I think top about it, you mentioned the Islanders, but I think given that we all believe that there's a side deal or pretty much reported a side deal, that one kind of gets thrown aside because of the fact we know there's probably a first rounder going back. But I think clearly Florida, Jonathan Marchessault being exposed, and granted, his advanced metrics aren't great, but a guy who can put the puck in the net, who's not that old, is clearly somebody who's going to have some interest, especially to a Vegas team that's looking to build something for the future. So I think that's kind of probably part one. And then part two probably has to be Peter Mrazek getting exposed as opposed to Jimmy Howard. And Mrazek wasn't particularly great last year, but he definitely was better at times than Howard. Howard's got a much bigger cap hit in the longer term, and the likelihood of Vegas taking Howard maybe over Mrazek is probably a bit less likely. So I was a bit surprised that they exposed Mrazek and ended up protecting Howard as opposed to going vice versa there.
Peter?
Sorry. And my protect list. I think Florida was a little surprising. Marchessault and Smith being available, not to mention choosing Reimer over Luongo. Now that's a contractual thing, but I'm sure obviously there's Florida would be a team I'd be looking at to wonder if they have some deals in place to protect those guys. At least Smith and Marchessault. The other weird one for me was St. Louis protecting Ryan Reeves. I mean, really? Ryan Reeves? Okay. Whatever.
Good in the room. That's what it is.
Peter.
Yeah, I'm not saying Ryan Reeves isn't a bad guy. I'm just saying you're looking at what's your most valuable assets, and is he that good in the room? Because he's not that great on the ice. He fills a role, but he's it's just an odd one.
Well, let me ask Kevin this. I mean, there was a similar reaction of what the hell are you doing from Maple Leaf fans when they protected Matt Martin over young guys like Brendan Leipzig or Kirby Reichel. And my interpretation of that and my interpretation of St. Louis is they're more interested in competing, like, say, right away. They think that they're very competitive, and Ryan Reeves and Matt Martin are two similar type of players who are there because of what they do in the locker room and their protection of their star players on the ice. And that's more valuable to Doug Armstrong and Lou Lamoriello than a 22-year-old kid like Brendan Leipzig, who might be a very good player, but might not be. You know what you're getting in Matt Martin, and St. Louis knows what they're getting in Ryan Reeves. That's why I think they're protected. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I think it's even simpler than that. The Reeves situation, just look at the Blues' available players, and what you will notice is they're not losing anybody. Like, this wasn't a either-or situation. Like, I had a hard time trying to figure out who Vegas would want. I think the Blues fans think it'll be David Perron because, he could be a 20-goal scorer. But, he is not, like Perron is not considered a valuable player. He's just a guy that scores goals. He's kind of sort of viewed as kind of an average player. And there was really nobody that I felt that St. Louis was worried about losing. And so they're allowed then to be able to keep a guy that they dislike, like Reeves, who's good in the room. And would have exposed Matt Martin, he was gone. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, felt in the West they needed to have some toughness. Martin can play the game and be tough. And, they got to have money really, I don't want to say it's no object, but, they got to get to the floor. And they would rather have a guy who, has a strong reputation for being able to do his job and do it well. And I think Martin would have been, the guy. So, I think more are filled through those situations. Like the Mrazek thing was less shocking to me. Like I wrote basically the same thing everybody else did, that either Mrazek than Jimmy Howard. But, the issue is character. Jimmy Howard is to the Red Wings what Fleury is to Pittsburgh. High quality human being, very well liked, played better than Mrazek. Mm-hmm. And Mrazek has not endeared himself to his teammates. Right. He doesn't play well with others in terms of this season. There was an incident that started to make the rounds regarding a discussion with a senior member of the Red Wings who had asked him to stay after practice and take shots for some of the injured players. Mrazek's response was unfavorable, and I think that just set the tone for the situation. He with goalie coaches, and to be honest, I think the Red Wings and him and just really didn't find any takers because that stuff gets around.
Russ,
can Mrazek still be a great goalie? Maybe. He's still young. And, now that he's available, maybe everyone will revisit it. I'm pretty sure George McPhee will call the Winnipeg Jets. He'll call the Philadelphia Flyers. He'll call the Vancouver Canucks. He'll call the Colorado Avalanche and say, does any of you have any Buffalo Sabres, Mrazek? If so, what will you give me? And if he doesn't find a good response to that, he'll take Riley Shane. That's what I think they'll do there.
Russ, what team sort of stood out for you?
Okay, well, first off, I will say I'm not surprised about Marchessault because even though I've always been a fan of his, he had a career year. He played an insane amount of ice time with a team that was very injured. I think they looked at that and said, are we going to get the same kind of year out of him? And they didn't feel like they could, and I think that's why they put him out there. The Rangers surprised me because they used to have a great defense corps. We all used to love it. Now they're protecting Nick Holden. Nick Holden, a guy who's got 1 year left on a cheap deal, who's really a defensive liability and especially was in the playoffs. Now, here's the interesting part. If they really covet Brendan Smith the way they say they do, I understand you're protecting him just to have his rights, but this is the New York Rangers. You definitely could get Brendan Smith signed with his rights. Now you're sort of leaving it to maybe like a handshake agreement when all of a sudden it goes to free agency that Smith will re-sign with you. Like they've sort of left that up in the air. And then, of course, Antti Raanta, we all believe there's a side deal with that. If there isn't a side deal, the Rangers are in trouble because they're not going to get the same kind of quality backup. The other team was the Flyers. Protecting Scott Laughton is a head-scratcher. It's a real head-scratcher because they let Nick Cousins go, who's got speed, who I thought played well at times last year, and they're keeping Laughton because they're touting his two-way play and his face-offs, and that's all well and good, but he doesn't have any foot speed. That's what's kept Scott Laughton down for this long is when the game got faster, because he literally got drafted as the game got faster. When the game got faster, he didn't. So I'm really surprised that they kept Scott Laughton because that one, I wouldn't have kept him.
Well, the one that surprised me, and it's for a little bit of a different reason than everybody else mentioned, was, I mean, there were a few that sort of bothered me. Florida was one, but not because of Marchessault. But you can tell that the general manager, there's a change in philosophy going back to Dale Talon because Marchessault was brought in by the analytics group that headed the Florida Panthers. And they also signed Jason Demers, and they protected Mark Pysyk and Alex Petrovic over a guy that they signed to a 5-year contract as a defenseman in Jason Demers. Now, maybe they think they overpaid for him, and there's no risk of putting him out there. But still, that speaks volumes to me that they exposed a 30-goal scorer and somebody who last year was purported to be a pretty good defenseman. Anaheim obviously has a deal with Vegas in place. There's no way that they would have exposed Vatanen or Manson, so that doesn't really surprise me. But everything I don't hear everything that's going on there. And Kevin, you definitely know more than me, but I haven't heard any kind of side deal talk between Vegas and Minnesota, and that means Matt Dumba is out there, and Matt Dumba is a pretty good young defenseman. I mean, that if there are teams like Toronto out there, and I know that Toronto probably will be looking to Vegas to see maybe they can make one of those swappity-do type of trades. If Matt Dumba is out there and Minnesota hasn't made a deal with Vegas, Matt Dumba is going either to Vegas or somebody else. There's no way that they don't take him.
Well, first of all, there was no deal in place when the production list went up. I can tell you that.
Right.
With Minnesota. Now, that doesn't mean Chuck tried to organize that now. But here's my take on that. I agree with you that there will be an auction. And to be honest, there are as many people who like as Matt Dumba. For some reason, Scandinavian admirers out there. But saying that, I think Dumba is the guy that would get the most value. But here's what I ask in this: at some point, though, don't you have to think of your own team? Like defensemen or offensive-minded defensemen are a very hard commodity to find. And Dumba has had 21 goals in the last 2 seasons. He's still relatively young. If I'm Vegas, the guys that I draft for myself for my team are Dumba for sure, because he's younger and still has an upside, and James Neal in Nashville, because they're not going to have any goals. Like, I think we're all going to like Las Vegas's defense going to score the goals for him. So you bring in Neal, and he's got 1 year left. You play him most of the year, and then next line, depending on where you're at, you move him out, and you get a second round pick and a prospect. So, is that me?
No. So somebody just turned up their volume. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Oh,
Sorry
okay,
about that, guys.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think it was you, Peter, because there's not an echo. Just turn on your volume if you could. No, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. George McPhee has to build a team, and if there are opportunity young players, he has to think. I mean, it's going to be nice, he's going to be able to get a good return on a number of players. But at some point, he's going to say, "This is somebody I want to keep for myself."
Well, here's one important point, though, that I don't think is getting enough play in the world. The difference between the previous expansion teams and the Vegas Golden Knights, everybody just, they were going to get a better shake. They're going to be a better team. But happened, and this has turned out to be ingenious, is like I don't think they're going to be nearly as good as the NHL envisioned when they first put this together. But what's happened, and I don't think people realized this was going to happen, is they are going to collect a lot of assets that's going to allow them to expedite, their growth as a team. And by that, I mean, they're going to have a minimum of 3 first-rounders and probably 4 in this draft. And they're going to have maybe 1 next year and lots of draft picks, pick up some prospects. So now, they're going to have a team better than. More importantly, they're going to have a cache of assets that's going to allow them to grow quickly. They're going to be able to turn those draft picks, and a lot of them are going to be first rounders and second rounders, into real players that, so we won't see like a 19-year wait for the Nashville Predators to get in the Stanley Cup final. So I think, I don't know if I don't want to call it an unintended consequence, because I think people realize that this would happen, but I don't think they anticipated to what extent it's going to happen. I don't know that when they put this in place, they thought, wow, Las Vegas is going to end up 5 or 6 prospects from other teams and 4 or 5 first rounders. I'm not sure that's what they think, but that's how it's going to work out, and that's what's going to really help them.
I'll tell you the other thing not being talked about, Kev, is the fact that if all these GMs were smart, they should have all gotten on a conference call and all said, who do you not want to lose? Who do you want to lose? Who do you want to lose? Because
you're still echoing here. Log off and log back on, Peter. Sorry about that. Go ahead. Keep going, Russ.
If all the other GMs had gotten on a conference call together, I think they could have figured out via trade and everything else who they'd want and who the other team would want to pick up. Because now, as a result, with trades stalling and not enough trades being made, this list is so far way better than, at least on to the naked eye right now, than probably some of these GMs expected. They probably expected they would have deals in place or have traded some of these guys, and now all of a sudden they're waiting and there's no trade, and well, that's the bad part.
I think what you're missing in this, though, Russ, is, and because when I've talked to GMs, the reason they told me there was no trades is because they couldn't fit the new guy into their protected 8. That's what caused the problem. So, they wanted the guys, but to do that, they would have had to move someone off their list, and they were unwilling to do that. What they wanted is to add a guy, but it was hard for them to get, more teams took the 8 than had been anticipated. Everybody assumed it would be a 7-3-1. And so those teams that had 8, there's no way because when you were acquiring players, they were people that were going to go on the other team's unprotected list because they couldn't fit them. Well, they would have to fit in yours too. The only team who was able, like New Jersey, was able to add Mirko because they didn't have anybody.
Well, but again, I'll go back to the Rangers. You're trying to tell me there was nobody out there in trade better than Nick Holden? I'll disagree with that.
But Russ, this the hope. So I wrote on this a little bit. So in terms of the Ronta, I personally don't think that Ronta was moved because I don't think they would have gotten an asset back. They really wanted one that was not required to be protected as part of the protection, or be the kind of picks they want. Also, you're going to have to expose Skapski. You were going to lose Ronta, and you were going to lose another asset to Vegas if you didn't have Ronta to put on the list. So the viewpoint probably was, look, we're going to lose somebody. Let's just make sure we only lose 1 and we don't lose 2. I was of the viewpoint, and I wrote also, I would have protected Brendan Smith. I would have opted not to give Vegas the 1/100% opportunity to possibly sign him to a long-term deal. But their viewpoint might have been, we have a guy who scored 11 goals for us. He's making $1.65 million. He is a defensive liability, but you might be able to put him on the third line. I don't agree with the view, but I think that's kind of the viewpoint that they had. But I did say I personally would have gone and added Brendan Smith to the list and left Holden out there on the hopes that maybe you entice Vegas to take Holden and you keep Fast and Lindbergh and Ronta and the guys you want to keep, as opposed to losing one of them and retaining Holden on the roster. But given what the requirements seem to be in terms of picks, Rangers aren't going to give up a first-round pick for that opportunity.
No, didn't they expose Grabner as well, which I thought – I thought that they wouldn't do that.
Top goal scorer.
Yeah, but who else are you not going to expose there? You're not going to expose. You're going to put Hayes on the list. You're going to not expose.
Listen, I'm going to be honest. I would have kept Grabner over Hayes because Kevin Hayes at this point had a horrible playoff, and Michael Grabner was their top scorer. If you lose Grabner, even though we're all saying, hey, he had the greatest year, he buried every opportunity he had on a breakaway. Even if he buries half of those, he's better than Kevin Hayes. Like, that could be a big loss. And how are they getting those 30 goals back? That's what I want to know.
I'm not even concerned about the 30 goals. I'm concerned about what happened with Hagelin with the loss of speed. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to keep Grabber. He had about 4 or 5 breakaways a game and hit maybe one at most. He had a 16.8 shooting percentage. So we don't expect that to continue again this year. But the speed that he had and the ability on the penalty kill especially was a huge component of what that third line did this season.
By the way, Kevin, Russ and I had a bet with Eklund regarding the 8 skaters and one goaltender. He thought that the over-under on that was, I think, really was a 2, Russ?
It was 2. So if you went 3 or more, he lost.
Oh,
right.
Good heavens.
And it was, and it ended up being 7 teams. I mean, yeah, and the Islanders being the weirdest one, and nobody else picked.
Yeah, the Islanders situation was the oddest. Just to have to go to them now and say, I'll give you a first-round pick if you leave our forwards alone. And boy, what a good deal that is for Vegas. So
of course, it's a great deal for them.
Well,
and the
thing is, Kev, is that Russ and I maybe had an indication of, we couldn't put the pieces together until just recently, but the Islanders had a very, very limited presence at the draft combine, which to me means they already knew they were going to trade their first round pick to Vegas. That's why they didn't invest so much time. They were there for a couple days. They didn't talk to, if there were like 20. If a player talked for 20 to 28 or 29 teams, invariably the 2 or 3 teams they didn't talk to, one of them was the Islanders. So they didn't talk to anybody, and they weren't there that long. So it sounded like they were set, or they had already made a deal with McPhee that they were going to trade their first-round pick and go this direction.
Here's the weird thing, too. In the last year, it seems like Garth Snow has lost the ability to make a trade. Like, there has been so many things he's really needed to do and hasn't been able to pull the trigger on any of it. There were a couple of years ago, he was making good trades. Like, it's just that has gone completely south for the Islanders, and it's going to hurt them. Losing that first-round pick is going to hurt them.
The Islanders are such a funny situation because, before the show started, we were talking a little bit about Arizona. At what point do you start to build something? The Islanders have been trying to build something. They just keep kind of failing at it. And that's a really good point, Russ. I think it was Russ, Kevin, or you or Russ who mentioned the idea that, why didn't these GMs get together? And I was thinking about that too, in that why didn't they get together and just say, okay, here's the deal. We know we're all going to lose a player. We just put it back to McPhee to say, you be careful who you take because you still have to do business with us.
Right.
But the problem with that is GM club, the first rule of GM club is you have to be nice. And I want these guys to get a little meaner, to say, you know what, you go ahead, George. You be very careful on who you take from us, because your owner may have paid $500 million, but you're going to have to do business with all 30 of us in the next couple of years. And you just remember that before you start taking picks. And I'm really surprised I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed a level of, hey, shot across the bow, buddy, watch yourself, didn't come out, because it should. They've got some leverage too. It's not just all on McPhee.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, Peter, you said that, because I said it to Russ, to Mike right before we started this call. Is the same thing. Is McPhee's talking very big now, but he's also got to remember that the shoe can flip very quickly, and he's going to be on the other side of all GMs looking to take advantage of him. And then, Russ, on your point on the Islanders, I can tell you right now, as you know, I live about 10 minutes from what I still call the mausoleum as a Rangers fan, and I can tell you all of my buddies out here, a lot of them did not migrate in terms of their fan base to Brooklyn. They don't particularly like the commute. They don't particularly like the arena. They don't like the sight lines. They don't like a whole bunch. And the fan base has really dwindled to a certain extent from out here because of the migration of them to Brooklyn. So if there is a move back either to Elmont or somewhere else, I think it would reinvigorate the fan base. But I think they miscalculated what the impact would be on moving from Long Island out to Brooklyn.
Kevin, I don't think it's going to get antagonistic between the other GMs and George McPhee, because it's the sort of same agreement that they have regarding restricted free agency.
Yeah,
It's sort of,
I've been listening to this, and I don't even know what you're talking about. I live in that world, talking to GMs, and I don't find anybody's mad at George McPhee, and I think everybody's, he's basically had a good time doing this, and for the most part, most of the GMs, I think no one feels like George is mistreating him or holding him over the barrel. I think a lot of them knew what was going to happen. The Islanders issue. I mean, we can talk all we want about whether Garth Snow has done a good job, but there is a lot of players that are the same. Their forward group. I mean, if you're talking Josh Bailey or who's the other guy there? It's another big forward
Brian
there.
Strong was unprotected.
Brock Nelson.
Yeah, Brock Nelson. Like, those are all three pretty good players, but they're not great players.
Right.
And the defense, they had a lot of sameness. Once you get beyond Letty and Boychuk, and I think they felt that their defense would be harder to replace, so they put all their emphasis on that, and they tried to tempt them by leaving Calvin DeHaan there, and they figure this is a poor draft. It's terrible to be in a position to have to give a first-round pick to save your forward group, but I don't see it as it's just one of those things. You got to lose somebody. Everybody does, but
I'd rather lose a player that I already know what it is than a player that I'm not sure that could necessarily be like one of my best players in the future.
That's fair. I mean, I get all that, and I wonder too whether they're overpaying for this. Everybody that's given if the deal that's been reported on Columbus, like they basically paid a first round pick to pass on
Jack Johnson.
And I don't think if Jack we're going to take Jack Johnson. I mean, does anybody believe they were going to select Jack Johnson?
No,
I don't see that. So.
Honestly, Kevin, I think the first round pick is more to take on David Clarkson's contract because, and in a way, and I've used this analogy before, David Clarkson's contract is like a $5 million coupon for the Vegas Golden Knights because he's never going to play again. They're going to getting almost, I think it's 80% reimbursement on the contract from insurance. And they have to reach the cap, and they have to reach the cap floor. So it's a guy who's never going to play for them, and they're never going to get to the top of the cap in the first 3 years. So it's a benefit for Vegas, and it's a benefit for Columbus because they clear the money, and now they can go spend that elsewhere because they're a team that's going to be competitive, or at least they think they're going to be competitive in the next few years. So
I agree with you. We don't know the extent of the deal yet. Is it going to include Carlton too?
The rumors are Aaron Portzline indicated in his column a couple days ago that the deal would encompass Clarkson going to Vegas, their first round pick going to Vegas, and Vegas limiting their picks to guys like William Karlsson or Matt Calvert. He had mentioned Ryan Murray, but they protected Ryan Murray, so that wasn't accurate. But
I guess my point is still the same. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
They're giving up Carlson and a first round pick to get rid of Clarkson.
That's a lot.
Now, Russ.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Russ. If all the deals that we think are going to take place do take place, if it's the Islanders, if it's Anaheim, if it's Columbus, then Vegas has 4 first round picks, and that's being conservative here. I mean, things may change, but in this draft, it's not a terrible draft.
They'll get some good players, and they're just not going to get players that they can insert in their lineup, which most drafts you can anyhow. So I think they would do very well. I think they're going to do great. Like, if I were the Islanders, I would have offered Vegas a second-round pick to take Brock Nelson so I don't lose my first-round pick. That's what I would have done, because if they don't value Brock Nelson anyhow, you probably could have tempted McPhee to take him because he is a pretty decent young player. He's going to score 15 goals on a team in Vegas. Like, I just would have done that because there's so many guys. Like, just as an example, if it's Cody Glass that turns into one of these Islander picks, and it won't be, but I'm just saying, if it's a guy of that nature or even a really great center or a really great defenseman, fans are going to look back at that and say, what did we get out of this? So if the Islanders don't do really well this season, they're going to look horrible in retrospect. That's what's going to happen. Now, Columbus, they could at least get a player with the cap savings. So at least there's something that they could prove to the fan base. Look, we couldn't wait on this player in the draft, so we're going to get somebody that'll help our team today. Okay, they at least did something that could help them. The Islanders didn't really do anything that could help them other than not losing a player that they valued, which, again, isn't really upgrading your team. At least Columbus can upgrade, and, of course, Vegas is upgrading just by opening the doors.
Peter, we were talking before the show started about guys like Enstrom who have 1 year left of their contract. The other guy that sort of is that I look at as a gem that other teams might want, not Vegas, but other teams, is Mathot. I mean, specifically on Enstrom, I mean, does he have enough left that at $5.75 million for an team that be interested in making some sort of deal with Vegas to flip to get him?
I think he does. Toby Enstrom, although a diminutive player in terms of size, he has weathered a lot of abuse. He has had some durability concerns, but he's still a smart puck-moving defenseman. He reads the point very well. When he's playing in the offensive zone, he has some instincts there that allow him to manage the puck and his position quite well. And I think there's a lot of teams that could use a player like that. I think the interesting thing is, as we talk about dollars, if Vegas were to take him and flip him, maybe they'd retain some salary, which would help their cap situation as well too. So, sure. And the other thing with Enstrom is, he's a free agent after this year. He's already waived his non-MC. He could be a valuable piece for Vegas at the trade deadline too, or another team if it didn't work out. I think, he has to be open to understanding that, but, there's value there.
I agree.
Yeah, that's why. Mathot, Kevin. I mean, there was a lot of talk before the protection list came out that Ottawa was trying, and it turns out to be in vain, trying to trade Dion Phaneuf in order to be able to protect Mathot, because Mathot is the defensive partner of Erik Karlsson. And you don't want to piss off Erik Karlsson when he's got short-term left on his contract. He's only got, I think, 2 years left. And Mathot is his defensive partner, apparently a good friend of his as well. And, I mean, I would think that Pierre Dorian would try to make some sort of deal.
He may have cut a deal.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so, because if they lose Mathot, I mean, and especially if he gets flipped someplace else, like a team like Montreal or a team like Toronto in their own division who desperately need defensemen, that could be very, very wounding to Ottawa. What do you think?
I hope they've cut the deal already, because there'll be an auction for him, because I agree. I think he's one of the guys that teams will covet just because he's accustomed to playing against top-line players and a stay-at-home guy. And I think they'll get high value for him. So, if Dorian was smart, he would have cut this deal prior to making him available, because, I just think they don't want to lose him. I completely agree. And that would be a big loss for them, a major loss.
Yeah. Now, there was reported, I believe it was TSN's Darren Drager reported that the Vegas had started talks, had at least approached Edmonton Oilers defenseman who's a UFA, Chris Russell. Now they can talk to UFAs and RFAs who haven't been qualified already. They have that freedom to do that early. I'm just questioning how extensive their pursuit of UFAs will be, Kevin, because, I mean, do you really want to tie up for
what else you have available? Because obviously if they sign that player, that counts as that player from that team. So the Oilers are not giving up anything. There's nobody there. Griffin Reinhart is not getting everybody all excited in Vegas. So, to them, that probably try to get a guy that, you think you can help, and, that's a better situation than what they have. So, I think that's a smart move.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't know how anxious. Now, for a guy like Chris Russell, who I believe is 31 years old, I don't think, Vegas is going to have to sign him to a 5-year deal. It's probably going to be a 2 or 3 year deal because he's over the age of 30. But for younger, Shattenkirk or Alzner, who McPhee had from going back to the Capitals days,
Yeah,
probably going to. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's so funny to me too. It's like, so many teams are looking for there's nobody there, but you look at all these available defensemen now, and it just seems like a plethora of quality defensemen who could help so many different teams. I mean, we just talked about Calvin DeHaan and Hickey, and Manson and Vatanen are exposed, and like every team is, and they have to because of the way there's no scorers, but boy, there are a lot of defensemen out there that a lot of teams would. I think you'll see Vegas take a bushel full of defensemen and then trade a lot of them.
Yeah,
I
think that's safe to say because right now, defenseman, the is so inflated now that it's definitely currency. Now the question I have though is the goaltending. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury appears that he's going to go to Vegas, but we don't know if he's going to stay there.
I think he is. I think
he's going to stay there.
Yeah, that's the impression I'm getting, that he said he would be willing to be the expansion team's goalie, and they're committed to him now. Who knows? I mean, will Philadelphia make an offer? I don't know. Will Winnipeg? I don't know what could. He's prepared for that. I think he's prepared to be their goalie.
So, Kevin, is it your feeling that there's going to be? I mean, because frankly, the pre-freeze deadline was a little disappointing. That we had a few deals. We had the Montreal deal for Beaulieu. We had Mike Smith, but there wasn't as many deals as we thought. I mean, are we expecting there to be a ton of deals involving Vegas that will be announced on either Wednesday or Thursday, or do you think it's going to be below expectations?
No. I think there'll be multiple deals. I've got to believe there'll be at least 10, maybe 15. And they're going to involve a lot of the players that are going to be, when they go through all the players, they'll say who it is they took, and then we're going to go through, and you're going to find that half those guys are going to have been dealt, right, to other entities. I really believe a lot of these defensemen are going to end up on other teams.
I got to tell you, I think the smartest deal was the Beaulieu deal because for Buffalo, I mean, they literally got themselves a second power play defenseman who is a fast skater and still has upside. He's 24. He's still not going to be exactly what he's going to be. And Montreal wasn't really giving him a ton of power play time. This guy has a lot more ability than I think he was able to show. And so that was a really shrewd move.
I like that deal too. I did.
Yeah, and I'll go.
So I was just going to say, and Buffalo was one of the few teams who had space to protect him. Right, that's the other key.
Right,
they pounced at the right moment because who cares about their defense?
Right.
Well, I mean, Jan, again, I said this on Friday, and I puzzled Ack by my analysis, but I don't understand what Montreal is doing right now. I mean, we know that there are probably moves to come, but right now, you traded your best young defensive prospect for a really talented winger. And Russ brought up the fact that, and I've heard over the weekend their plan might be to move him to center, and I don't know about that. And then they trade Beaulieu, who they clearly wanted to move on from, and they got a 3rd round pick for him. They're apparently allergic to any defenseman who is under the age of 30. I don't know what Montreal is doing right now, and Bergevin is purportedly a pretty smart GM, but right now, if things just stood the way they are, I don't know what they're doing.
Well, I think one of these defensemen that's going to be drafted is going to go to Montreal. I don't know who it'll be, but I think one of them.
Yeah.
But here's another one that's puzzling. So
So I was going to say is, I mean, I know there's all the rumors about Galchenyuk getting dealt, and I guess the secondary part of it was that now would be for a defenseman, just because they've gotten rid of two of them. I mean, the Sergachev move for Drouin, I mean, Drouin's got a ton of pressure on him playing in Montreal, but I think he's got the talent to succeed. And there's been talk about pairing him with Galchenyuk. The Beaulieu move, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, granted, he hasn't panned out maybe as much as they would have thought, but to a certain extent, A, they gave him away with a third-round pick. I don't think they got an enormous amount back from him. And B, as you said, to move on from another young defenseman on a blue line that's questionable right now anyway, just seems to be a misuse of assets. So that's one where that's the one I think that's more of a head scratch than anything else. The Sergachev one, you can say, hopefully if they do bring back Radulov and you have Radulov, Drouin, and Galchenyuk, now you've improved your offense. Conversely, though, maybe they just feel that Carey Price will stand on a set every night and win you games that way just because they have nobody on the blue line other than maybe Weber. Markov is aging, and they don't have a ton else there that's really ready right now to step in and fill roles.
Yeah, everybody's – go ahead, Russ.
Here's the other one that was puzzling, was Arizona. They trade Mike Smith. Okay, his trade value was high. They don't protect Domingue.
Go ahead.
Domingue is unprotected, right?
Yep.
So who's their goalie next year? I mean, Merrick Matson was a good trade. I like that trade, but he's 3-4 years away. Who is their goalie? Like, they seem totally okay with going into not only the expansion draft, but free agency, not even knowing who their number one goalie is. Like, how am I supposed to wonder when Arizona is going to get their franchise goalie?
They know who their goalie is going to be. We just
okay, that's fair.
But the puzzling thing, Russ, was they protected, and I'm not attacking him, but they protected Luke Shen. And I never thought that Luke Shen would be a guy that you would protect. I mean, I'm
again, just who did they leave off? I mean, they're worse than St. Louis. There's nobody to take off the Arizona, because there's nobody else there.
That's the point, Kevin. They protected 8 skaters because they wanted to protect less. They protected Luke Shen because they didn't want to protect Radim Verbata or some of these forwards. They actually wanted to get rid of them, or at least expose them to the possibility of getting rid of them. And that's just bizarre. But okay. Okay, we'll end the show here. We're not sure what's going to go on in terms of our schedule for the webcasts this week. I know that Wednesday we're probably not going to be doing anything because Russ and I will be driving to Chicago. I don't
know if I can drive. Like, I'm a little worried.
we may do one tomorrow, but it might be with Ack from Europe along with me and whoever else. But we will
like Thelma and Louise. I'm just warning people.
Yeah, they're. We will.
I just don't even want to know who's playing the Brad Pitt role in this one. So
let's not go there, please. Okay,
but 2/3 of the show could maybe not be coming back. That's what we're trying to let the people know.
Yes, I'm an excellent driver.
Do we get to vote?
You don't get to vote. No.
Damn.
And so sure what's going to happen on Thursday or on Friday on draft day. So we will let you know. Just stay tuned to HockeyBuzz.com. For Kevin Allen, for Jan Levine, for Pete Tessier, for Russ Cohen, for Eklund, who was here for about 2 seconds. I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.